Psalm 116 is a thanksgiving psalm, and it moves from crisis to resolution. It's a prime example of what we've been talking about in this series, that the Psalms are a way for us to move through the different phases of our spiritual life, from being stable and well-oriented. We enter into a time of disorientation, and then God does something and we are reoriented, that we find ourselves in a better place than when we started in the beginning. For you, Lord, have delivered me from death, my eyes from tears and my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before you in the land of the living. The beauty of this psalm, and most of all of the psalms, is that the specific situation or circumstances aren't spelled out for us. They're hard to discern in some cases, but they're a bit like tofu, in that they absorb whatever you cook with them. They absorb that flavor so that we can come to the Psalms, and maybe the cords of death weren't entangling us, but we can relate to the distress and despair and the overwhelming experience of the psalmist, and also the relief that comes when God answers our prayer. In the swirl of death, the psalmist cries out to God, and God delivers. And the result is a pledge to a continued life of prayer, as long as he has breath to do so. I love the Lord, for he heard my prayer. He heard my cry for mercy. He turned his ear towards me, and I will call on him as long as I live. The Apostle John put it much more simply when he said, we love because God first loved us. But the author of Psalm 116 isn't idealistic. Although he's been delivered, he knows that that might not always be the case. In verse 15, he acknowledges that God sometimes chooses not to rescue us, but nonetheless, his care and concern is with us. Still, the death of his faithful servants are precious in his sight. His care for us runs deep, even when we aren't delivered the way we hope. Indeed, the psalmist follows up his opening words of praise, saying, I will call out to you throughout my life, as long as my life endures, implying that he knows he's going to have to call on God again and again and again. In verse 10 through 19, the psalmist moves from acknowledging God's deliverance and his compassion and grace and his quickness to answer prayer. He moves on to a vow of gratitude. But before he gets there, there's an awkward pause of self-reflection. As if the magnitude of what he has just said or just wrote or just sung kind of falls upon his soul, and he's startled by its weight. Verse 3, the cords of death entangle me. The anguish of the grave came over me, and I was overcome with distress and sorrow. But then I called on the name of the Lord. Lord, save me. The Lord is gracious and righteous and full of compassion. Return to your rest, my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. You know, I'm at that wonderful age where there is sometimes a disconnect between my mind and my body, where my mind says, I got this, and my body says, oh, no, you don't. I think the psalmist is having a bit of a disconnect in his soul, where he acknowledges that God has delivered him, but he's still living in the mindset that he's bound up. And so he pauses to talk to himself. Sometimes we need to do that. We know in our mind that we have been delivered and set free. We've been rescued and redeemed and all of that, and yet we still walk around as if we're under this cloud of oppression and bondage. That's when we need to pause and consider. Even though we praise with our lips, sometimes it doesn't sink into the soul. And the psalmist says, return to your rest, my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. I encourage you all to pause in this Lenten season to speak to your soul and to remind yourself to return to your rest, for the Lord has been good to you. And then in verse 8, that was verse 7. In verse 8, there's a shift that comes in life. It's good to be alive. Life has been reordered. He's called on the Lord and been delivered from death. His eyes have been delivered from tears, his feet from stumbling. And he cries out, I trusted in the Lord. And then he goes on to declare that he will call on the Lord as long as he lives. And then he asks himself, what can I give in return for the Lord's goodness? He's overwhelmed by a sense of gratitude and a debt that he cannot repay. It's like when we sing that song, when I survey the wondrous cross. Were the whole realm of nature mine, it would be a gift far too small. He's overwhelmed by gratitude. And what do you give? What do you give in return for your soul? What do you give to the God of all compassion who endured the cross and its scorning, its shame, that we might be rescued from the power of sin and death? What do you give the God who created everything, who needs nothing and wants nothing except the company of your presence? So the psalmist pledges a vow of gratitude. Verse 12, what shall I give in return to the Lord for all his goodness to me? I will lift up the cup of salvation and call on the name of the Lord. That is an offering of gratitude, of thanksgiving. I will fulfill my vow to the Lord in the presence of his people. And then the psalmist vows to give thanks and praise to God publicly, because doing so, he hopes to encourage other people to trust and call out to God in their troubles, whatever they might be, and to keep faith even if he doesn't deliver the way we hope that he would. But it's not just a verbal expression of gratitude, but the commitment of a life of gratitude. Truly, I am the Lord's servant. I serve you just as my mother did, and you have freed me from my chains, and so I'm going to serve you freely. Now, to tell the truth, this isn't the psalm I originally had scheduled for this morning. I was going to do Psalm 73, and we might get to there, but that psalm begins, if you're familiar with it, I envied the wicked, and I almost lost my footing. I didn't think that was an appropriate psalm for this morning. Psalm 116 usually shows up after Easter because of its movement from death to resurrection. But it's a really fitting psalm for us here today as we celebrate Robyn's 10th anniversary on staff at Storrs Community Church. Primarily because the posture of the psalmist, a life of gratitude in response to God's faithfulness, is Robyn's posture. She has lived faithfully in response to God's mercy in her own life, sometimes even when it's been difficult, yet she has remained faithful and committed to a life of gratitude. I should note to you that today marks we celebrate her 10 years of paid ministry. She actually began serving in our children's ministry in 2007. We as a church had come through a difficult time and were meeting at Hope Lutheran Church on Dog Lane. Excuse me. Prior to that, we had been renting space from the Mansfield school system, and Hope had graciously given us their space on Sunday mornings, and also was the first time we had space available to us during the week. And so for the first time, we ran a vacation Bible school, and Robyn helped us pull that together. Following that event, seeing some of Robyn's gifts that she might not have seen at the moment, we asked her to lead our children's ministry. And she provided much-needed stability at a critical time in the life of the church. A year after that, 2008, we launched a building campaign. And in the summer of 2010, we moved into this space here. Over time, God blessed us, and the number of children and families in our congregation grew. And it became strategically obvious that a volunteer position wasn't going to be enough. And so a search committee was formed. Robyn was part of that committee. And we worked through a stack of resumes and interviewed prospective candidates. And after a year, we were nowhere. And at some point, we turned to Robyn and said, "You should apply." The challenge, however, was that it was significant. We were still relatively new in this space and didn't yet have the budget to be able to pay the quarter of a small salary full time. So we began to pray, and our Roots and Reach campaign came together, and we raised enough money to phase into the position over 3 years. And so we stepped out in faith, and Robyn stepped out in faith, giving up a much more secure position and a better paying job working with at UConn in alumni relations at the NEAG School of Education. She willingly stepped out in faith to come here. And we were dependent on keeping her employed. It was dependent on us growing as a congregation and growing our budget. But Robyn's impact has been wonderful. From the beginning, she cast vision and moved us forward. She adapted and made successful changes and shifts, moving us first from a children's church model to a small group model. Then making shifts and adapting at strategic points in her ministry, particularly during the season of COVID. And then again, when the population of our kids, the demographic shift, she made continual adjustments, and she made the call to move our high school program from Sunday morning to Sunday evening, and it's been a significant move for us. More importantly is Robyn's passion for spiritual formation and her deep concern and love for our children and teens. Making sure that they understand their faith and grow in the relationship with Christ. I bet you, I don't keep track, but a couple of times a month at least, Robyn comes into my office with a story, an exciting story about something God is doing in the life of one of our kids. She's overjoyed and can't keep it in. She eagerly points others to Jesus and provides support for them to identify where they're at and what they need to do next. Robyn is mission-minded. She understands the the mission of the church and is always looking for ways to bless our community, particularly the town of Coventry. She is capable and skilled at recruiting, and which is evident from her team of 30-plus volunteers. She's a clear and competent communicator who cares and appreciates for her volunteers in practical ways, keeping them informed. Robyn is also a great team player. At first, I wasn't so sure. I was a little nervous. I was sitting in my office and I was thinking, I'm never going to know what she thinks and feels. She's such a clam. There was a little bit of an adjustment period. But she's added a lot of fun, energy, and a little irreverence as well to our time together here. But it makes my life easier as she handles a lot of the details that would overwhelm me and as she executes her ministry. She's a team player through and through, though, and quick to take on responsibility and provide support without being asked. She consistently gives 110% and is committed to excellence. She's willing to serve in any capacity and do whatever needs to be done. So today, we echo Psalm 116. We love the Lord for hearing our prayer for our children's ministry. We love the Lord for providing Robyn at just the right time. We love the Lord for sustaining her, for growing her gifts, and for blessing our congregation through her faithful service. Robyn, we thank you for saying yes in 2007, and again when we asked you to apply for the position. And we thank you for your vision, your dedication, your adaptability, and your wholehearted commitment to Jesus and loving our children and our families. Amen.